Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Ramadan Kareem. On behalf of UAE Internal Auditors Association, I welcome you to the third session of the 5-day series that are being held by the association to create awareness of internal audit during May as an International Internal Audit Awareness Month. Just to let you know that CPE credits will be issued and sent by next week. All the videos will be available on UAE IAS YouTube channel, and all the presentations will be uploaded on the association's website by next week. Should you have any questions, please write them down and they will be responded to later on by this presenter. Before we begin today's session, we have a special awareness message from Anthony Pulis, who is the IAE Global President and CEO for the members. So we will broadcast it and then we will begin the session. Please listen to Anthony.
Hi, I'm Anthony Pugliese, President and CEO of the Institute of Internal Auditors. On behalf of our staff at IAA headquarters and the Global Board of Directors, I'd like to take this opportunity to encourage and celebrate your contributions to internal auditing and for your continued advocacy for our profession. It's only through your efforts that we can gain a better understanding, acceptance, and support for the important work each of you do day in and day out. Many professions enjoy an inherently universal understanding of their value. Most people understand the role of a doctor, for example, so a campaign designed to build awareness of what doctors do is generally not necessary. Unfortunately, this may not be true for the internal audit profession. In fact, even internal auditors' close friends and families don't always understand exactly what we do. That's why each year in May, the IIA encourages members, chapters, and affiliates around the world to celebrate internal audit accomplishments as part of Internal Audit Awareness Month. We have much to be proud of, and spreading the word each May allows us to display the great value internal audit brings to organizations and to the public. The IIA supports efforts to raise awareness of the internal audit profession and its value. The aim is not only to dispel misperceptions, but also to enhance the business community's knowledge of the essential role internal auditing plays in strong organizational governance, internal control, and effective risk management. When management and boards of directors come to fully appreciate our contributions, they ensure the internal audit activity is adequately sourced and effectively utilized. Similarly, as the general public becomes more familiar with what internal auditors do, the number of individuals who consider it a viable career option rises, fueling the profession with even greater talent. As an internal audit professional, you play an important role in raising awareness and elevating the profession. Whether you're actively involved in your local chapter or affiliate, new to the field, part of an extensive audit team, or the sole practitioner at your organization, there's something you can do to elevate the profession. Over the past year, we've been in uncharted territory, personally and professionally. As a result of the devastating coronavirus pandemic that continues to this day, our lives and jobs have been directly affected, with greater demands placed on internal auditors at all levels, as we continue to work through the short and long-term challenges with many unknowns still in front of us. Last year, we modified Internal Audit Awareness Months to respect the unexpected demands on your time. Instead of concentrating it in one month, we encouraged activism as best you could over a longer period of time. We asked that you focus on what mattered the most, but also pause now and then to chronicle your successes, where you and your teams rose to the occasion and demonstrated the value your efforts were bringing to your organizations. I was grateful to see such incredible commitment. Through a variety of virtual events and awareness campaigns designed to inform and engage, dozens of chapters and institutes around the world and many more individuals shared their passion for internal auditing, raising awareness of the profession and helping stakeholders understand the value of internal audit in their organizations. We showed our appreciation by honoring 34 affiliates with Building Champion Awards. Thank you. We're not back to normal, or not the normal we used to know. But what hasn't changed is the vital role internal audit plays at all times, and especially during crisis. So if you haven't already started, I'd like to encourage you to spread the word and tell the world in May. The IIA offers a number of ways, as we say, to shout it out, and this year marks the rise of the trusted advisor. We have customizable tools, planning resources, and thought-provoking content to help advocate for and build awareness of the internal audit profession. Access our awareness toolkit and thought leadership during May or anytime year-round. Go to the IIA's global or North American website and look for Promote the Profession for more information. Despite unprecedented challenges, you've pushed ahead with courage and determination to help build awareness of what internal audit brings to our stakeholders. It's through the collective efforts of affiliates and chapters around the world that we raise the profile of internal auditors as key to the success of all organizations. Thank you for everything you do to elevate the profession each and every day. For IIA Global, I'm Anthony Pugliese, and thank you.
Today's speaker is Ruby Shinomona. She is responsible for delivery of IT-related audits as a director at Protiviti Global. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Ruby. Ruby, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Right. So thank you very much all for coming. Just going to make sure that I can be. Sorry, just still struggling a bit with technology, but I think I'm in now. So thank you so much for the introduction. So I'll just give a little brief about myself, just to introduce myself to the audience, who I am, my skills, capabilities, and where I'm coming from. So essentially, I've got a very solid internal audit background. I started my career as an IT auditor with big four firms in Zimbabwe, prior to transitioning to the United Kingdom, where I did a bit of work with other big four firms as well, prior to moving back to Africa, which is where I'm from, to essentially work in internal audit as an IT audit manager for a big bank in South Africa, and then eventually making the move to the Middle East, where I am now, and back again in consulting. So the topic for today that we'll be going through is internal audit and how it's adapting to change in the age of disruption. So I think what has happened in most instances is that when disruption is spoken about, it's spoken about from a business context, but I've hardly ever heard it being spoken about from an internal audit context. So in most instances, we are the ones essentially providing organizations some information or, consultancy, advisory information on how to manage disruption, but it does not really sometimes speak to the work that we do on a day-to-day basis and how we are also required to move with the wave, so to speak, just to ensure that we are also not caught out in the wave. So I'll just put through my presentation and we can just start with going through what disruption really is about as a starting point. So the key questions, I suppose, that one would ask, what is disruption itself? It's a term that is thrown around a lot. It's something that is spoken about frequently, but what is it really? And that's one of the key things that we'll be thrashing out on, just to try and understand it. I'm sure that we all do, but I suppose we could all just refresh each other again. And then we're going to talk about how disruption is actually changing the risk landscape, because obviously the risk landscape cannot stay the same. There will be changes that have occurred, and we need to understand how they impact our work as internal auditors, because at the end of the day, we are part of the group of people that's responsible for being custodians of risk within the organizations that we work in. Then the one key thing that I'd really like to talk about is, yes, disruption exists, but there's something that's really happened with COVID-19. And it's one of those things that is very, very pertinent to us at this point in time. So yes, we can talk about disruption in the broader business sense, but we can see it really affecting our day-to-day work from a COVID-19 perspective. So we want to understand how COVID-19 has impacted the work that we do as internal auditors. And then there are some questions that I've put together. We'll go through those once we're done. So what is disruption? So basically, disruption can just be described as innovation that can radically alter the way that an organization does its business. So we see that the way that business has been done over time has changed dramatically from the 1700s to where we are. We've witnessed about 4 industrial revolutions in over a span of time, and we are now literally at the cusp of the 5th one that most of us would obviously recognize because we are living in the era. But I think what I'll just do is to talk through some of the changes that have happened over time, just to get an understanding of where we are and why it's important for us to figure out how we can relate to our situation now. So the 1700s were characterized by mechanization, and you know, people would use a lot of very rudimentary equipment just to try and get their businesses up and running and discharge on the things that they did on a day-to-day basis. And then the 1800s brought about electrification, which obviously assisted with powering up some of the machines that were being used, some of the manual machines that were being used in the 1700s, and increasing efficiencies and outputs as a result. Then came the 1970s, the era of automation, where a lot of industrial processes were being automated, and again, changes brought about an increase in efficiency of discharging on the day-to-day business that the organization, any organization in question would be responsible for. And now we are at the age of digitization, where the focus is not so much on use of machinery or electrification or automation, but more around the use of internet-based technologies to facilitate the way that business is provisioned across the world, really. So if we go to the examples of some of the biggest disruptors that we have in our age of digitization, we realize that these are entities that we're familiar with, that we probably interact with, and probably really enjoy as well. So some of the biggest disruptors, the biggest winners are Netflix, where their streaming services have essentially transformed the way that the entertainment industry now works. So I'm sure there are individuals who are born after a certain time who may not even remember or even have any conception of what it was like to have video rental stores. So the way that the streaming services work now seems to be something that will not be stopping soon, and that will probably be affecting other service providers in similar industry, in the same industry, such as your cable and digital satellite subscriptions. So we see that such companies are not stopping from an evolution perspective. They will continue to evolve and change business in the industries that they are actually operating. Skype is another one where they introduced or really popularized video conferencing facilities that have now been literally enhanced by other services such as MS Teams that I'm sure a lot of us would be using on a day-to-day basis as we conduct business, and Zoom for business and social purposes as well. So these are some of the biggest winners in that space, where although these platforms have existed for a period of time, the COVID pandemic literally just catapulted them in a manner that nobody could ever really imagine. So the forms of communication as we know them now have changed dramatically and have replaced the way that we communicate on a day-to-day basis. We are here on the webinar, and in days gone past, maybe we would have met at an IIA conference, but we can now pretty much discharge these services online. Then Wikipedia is again one of the biggest winners as far as disruption is concerned, because encyclopedias used to be the way of life. Again, there are others who may not even have any conception of encyclopedias because they may never have seen them. But I certainly remember a time when a home that had people or individuals who were interested in amassing knowledge would have a whole library of encyclopedias. But nowadays you hardly ever see that anymore, because you can literally at the click of a button access in Wikipedia and get the information that you need at your fingertips. So basically the way that businesses are evolving is really driven by a lot of different factors, and most of them are led by digital-led initiatives. So this obviously has an impact on the risk landscape, because it obviously cannot stay the same. And this is where it starts to get very interesting for us as internal auditors. So one of the key things that is quite important to reflect on is the fact that, if the executive management or the board of directors do not have an understanding of the kind of disruption that could exist to their business model, then it's impossible for them to really have a proper understanding of the harm that it imposed to the organization, in the sense that it's very, very, possible for an organization not to exist anymore in the form that it used to exist, as we have seen with some organizations that have not been able to literally move with the times and ride the wave, so to speak. So we have done surveys in Protivity just to try and understand how business leaders and IT directors or IT leaders and internal audit and risk leaders as well are thinking about risk. And one of the key things that has come out is the fact that there has been a change in the way that strategic risk is being viewed. So the risk categories are a little bit skewed nowadays to risks that really could have an effect on how the business would still be a going concern tomorrow if the business is unable to pretty much understand the way that the world is going, and whether or not it would still be able to provide services in the manner that it used to in the past. So the rapid speed of disruptive innovation has literally, pretty much moved in a manner that it has gone beyond or outpaced the organization's ability to compete in the market that it exists in. So it's important to continuously evaluate and understand where the business is placed, so as to make sure that the business is not overrun by changes in its market, and at the end of the day it becomes a problem for all involved. So it's important to think about those disruptive innovations and how they are affecting the businesses that we are all a part of. One other thing to think about is resistance to change operations, in the sense that change may happen in a manner that may not exactly reflect in the way that the business is responding to the changes in the market. So the resistance to change may end up impacting the organization and literally stop it from making the right kind of adjustments to the business models or the core operations that the business is involved in. So those are some of the things that, from a risk perspective, internal audit needs to think about, just to ensure that it is still providing value and helping the organization to literally ride the wave and stay relevant, so as to continue making profit and be a going concern. So some of the risk categories that we have started to see are around artificial intelligence risks. So it's important to note that in the past, when you looked at risks, key risks in an organization, these may not be some of the risk categories you would have observed, because there was a lot of emphasis on operational risks. But if you look at the way that the risk registers have evolved, you will start to see some of these risk categories being highlighted as well. So security and resilience obviously is getting a lot of attention, and it is coming up as one of the most prominent risks that organizations are literally thinking about. And you know, for board members, for board audit committee members, it's something that keeps them awake at night. And you definitely see how that plays out in on the risk registers. Data governance and protection, again, is something else that is receiving a lot of attention, in the sense that in the past, in as much as organizations have been quite interested in understanding how their data is protected, they were not, you really didn't see individual categories that tried to separate this risk category as a line item on its own that required specific emphasis. But again, it's something that we're beginning to see a lot on a lot of risk registers. Humanizing the workforce. So this is not something that is as prominent as the other two things that I have spoken about, but definitely it's something that is starting to make a big splash on the risk registers as well, because obviously the way that we're working, being a lot more leaning in the digital sort of like era, makes it, you know, a little bit blurred in terms of understanding where humans and machines would start and end. But it's now starting to receive a lot of focus, just to make sure that the requirements of the workforce in this era are still understood. And then ethics and compliance frameworks, again, you will see that there is a lot of emphasis and a lot of focus being placed on just trying to understand the kind of frameworks or guidelines that organizations are now operating under. So from a regulatory perspective, you will find that most countries are starting to come up with some regulation to try and basically manage the way that organizations do business. And there's now a bigger requirement for adherence, and there's a lot of monitoring, a lot of focus on monitoring as well. So it's one of the things that we've started to see making a huge impact on the risk registers, just to make sure that the right compliance frameworks are in place, and then there is adherence to the requirements of those frameworks. So artificial intelligence risks, again, so this is starting to really receive a lot of focus, although maybe not as developed as the other areas. But again, some organizations have started to employ artificial intelligence, and of course, you would understand that risks in this particular space are still evolving, probably not as well understood. But again, it's now important for organizations to start to think about how those kind of risks could impact the way that business is done. So moving on swiftly to COVID-19 and how it's actually impacted internal audit, I wanted to start with just giving a brief overview of disruption and what it means to the business. But really, the key focus for discussion for me was understanding how COVID-19 has impacted internal audit, obviously, because as business, business is involved with operational issues that relate to, what the organization has been created to do in the sense of the products and services that it offers to the market. So the business people would be interested in ensuring that those products and services are discharged to the market. But we would be interested in ensuring that the risks relating to how those products and services are given to the market are well understood. But at the same time, we may not necessarily place the same amount of focus that the business would in terms of understanding disruption. And this is where it can be a little bit tricky for us, like I stated earlier. So I wanted to talk about COVID-19 because I think that COVID-19 is quite relevant in the sense that we are directly impacted. So this is not something that we can ignore. So COVID-19 has been the biggest disruptor in the past 18 or so months, maybe 12 months or so. And we have certainly seen it make changes in the way that we work as an internal audit function or internal audit functions. So I wanted to share or rather provide some insights as to how, as internal audit, we can respond to the COVID-19 disruption in a manner that enhances, one, the way that the functions work, and also provide value to the business. So the first thing that probably needs to be thought about is annual audit planning and risk assessment. So in a lot of organizations would find that annual audit planning is done on a 3-year cycle where a risk assessment is made, and then the key areas of risks are determined and they're all laid down in a plan. So this plan in a lot of organizations is probably pretty much assessed on an annual basis and updated in line with whatever changes would have occurred within the organization. So one of the key things that I have seen to be quite important is an assessment that needs to be done on probably a more frequent basis of that annual audit plan or a risk assessment exercise. So one of the key things that we could always ask ourselves is, at the present moment within our organizations, do the plans that we have actually reflect the potential risks as they relate to disruption? So we've spoken a bit about disruption. We have looked at a couple or maybe 3 examples of what of companies that have really done well as far as disruption is concerned. And believe it or not, a lot of organizations will have some level of disruption, but it may not be well identified because the risk assessment process is not agile enough to enable identification of those changes to be made and updated on the audit plans in a timely manner. So it's important to continuously reflect on what is available on the plans and then check to see if the plans have been updated as necessary. Again, in the same vein, it's important to understand what changes have actually occurred within the organization that require reassessment. So I usually find that sometimes there is understanding that there are things that have changed, but there is no, what can I say, confidence per se from an internal audit perspective to go and make an assessment of those changes and eventually update the audit plan as it needs to be updated. So it's important to constantly assess the changes within the environment and make the relevant changes to the plan as necessary. One of the other things that has impacted the way that we work, and I think a lot of people will probably understand this because everybody has been impacted in some way or the other, that is remote working. So a lot of organizations may have had some form of remote working capability, but definitely not to the extent that we see it now. So on a personal basis, I worked for an organization once that had a pretty well-developed remote working capability and plan. But at the time, the organization only required remote working on a part-time basis. And what I mean by that is there was no requirement for people to work away from the office for extended periods, but maybe just once a week or maybe twice a week, depending on the team structures within the organization. But nowadays, obviously, everybody has been working primarily from home. Some people have gone back to the office, but at a point in time, we were all working away from the office. So it led me to think about what internal audit needs to do to pretty much come up with innovation that allows us to be able to execute audits that cannot be done on site whilst you're somewhere else. So I was thinking primarily around audits that would require things like physical counts of stock or having to observe particular controls and procedures. So it's one of those questions that probably would come up in a lot of audit shops to say, what are the innovative methods that we have as an audit shop to try and ensure that work can always continue and there's no downtime, there's no impact on our execution should we not be able to be on site physically. So I was recalling a conversation that I had with another internal auditor, and they were telling me that for the stock counts, they actually used drones to pretty much go out, make an assessment of the stock, and they used the video footage from the drones to count the number of items that was available. So obviously there are pros and cons with each and every single method or plan that organizations can come up with, but nevertheless, it's quite important to start really having a think about it because this is the way of the future. Another issue that has come up for me that I think is quite pertinent to think about is how are the teams coping with the changes? So in the past, it was possible, obviously, to go to site for those who work in consultancy environments and interact with the teams. For those who don't work in consultancy environments, they work in teams or they worked in teams, they would be able to, interact on a day-to-day basis physically, sharing ideas, assessing their audits on a continuous basis as they went along. But now that we're not meeting physically, it introduces an additional layer of complexity in the sense that we cannot immediately see each other and ask each other questions as we used to. So there's that aspect, and then there's also the aspect of isolation in the sense that if I am working on my own and I don't have access to people, how does that impact me from maybe even a mental health perspective? or just being able to process the information that I am dealing with in order to come up with the best possible results. So it's important to pretty much have a view of how the teams are doing and how the teams can work better and more effectively to produce the best results possible without really feeling the impact. So it's literally working as if we worked in an environment that didn't require us to work online. So some of the things that I have seen teams do are obviously very frequent check-ins just to try and understand where everybody is placed and how they're doing. And in some more creative teams, people have come up with social activities that are revolving around video conferencing facilities, people having quizzes or going out on a drinks night, a team drinks night, or whatever events that they used to prior to the COVID situation happening. And then another issue that I found to be quite important for internal audit teams to consider is resilience. So in the past, I think what I observed, I'm not too sure it would be the same for everyone, but perhaps a lot of you might relate, is that internal audit did maybe not actively participate in the business continuity plans, but would have been quite involved in maybe reviewing the processes. So yes, internal audit would have been part of the plan, but perhaps a lot of emphasis would have been on the operational teams for understandable reasons. But I think now it's important for internal audit to actively assess how they are participating in drafting the continuity plans for their own processes. So if, say, internal audit activities cannot be discharged, have we given thought around how we as internal audit would be able to bridge those particular gaps and ensure that we would still be able to provide the best possible value to our businesses? So yes, organizations have definitely upped offerings by providing remote working facilities, and as internal audit we have jumped onto that as part of the business as well. But again, it's probably still not enough to just rely on the remote working facilities and get a sense of comfort that we still would be able to discharge our functions. So it's important to think about ensuring that we've got a solid business continuity plan. We've thought about all possible sorts of scenarios that could impact the way that we do work, and we've come up with the right kind of mitigations to ensure that internal audit services are not impacted should anything else come up. So the next thing that I thought would be quite important to think about is digital leadership. And what I mean by that is internal audit as a function has to identify opportunities for automating internal audit processes. So this speaks a lot to continuous monitoring and continuous auditing. And what I have seen is that a lot of companies have started to think about this a lot more. And as a consultancy firm, we've been receiving a lot of requests to try and basically assist with identifying opportunities for automating internal audit processes. So in the past, most of our work has been based on sampling, where we would pretty much go out, have a look at available population sizes and pick up samples that we think are representative of the population sizes. But I think one of the key questions that is being asked a lot nowadays is this approach still useful? Is it still valid? Is there any audit risk in the way that we do our work? Because there might be things that we may not be able to quickly identify that could pretty much be taken care of by automating some of our internal audit processes. So not only will automation enable us to identify some risks that we cannot perhaps quickly identify if we did the our audit testing manually, but it also improves efficiencies in ways that cannot even be imagined. And what it then does is that it frees up internal audits time a lot more to enable us to really focus a lot more on those other operational disruption issues that the businesses that we serve would be dealing with on a day-to-day basis. It's very difficult, I suppose, to some extent, to be trying to deliver on our day jobs and their requirements, and at the same time sit down to really have long thoughts about the strategic issues that the organizations face whilst we are burdened with the requirements to be producing audit reports on time to a certain level of quality. And certainly this is where automation of our processes would really go a long way. Then another question would then come up around automation, and it's something that I've heard frequently, and it's around the validity of our profession. If we automate a lot of our processes, would we still be valid as internal auditors? And the question still remains yes. I think it has been answered in some other webinars that have been going on throughout the week. So it's just a case of internal audit literally increasing their skills and trying to get to a point of perhaps getting a lot more capabilities around areas such as data, data management, data analysis rather, and we would still then be able to use all of the information that we use on a day-to-day basis, the skills that we have on a day-to-day basis, and just overlay them with a new set of skills to enable us to pretty much get the best value from automating our internal control processes. Security and privacy. So again, this is one of the key areas that I've seen come up a lot more, in the sense that there are a lot of vulnerabilities to think about now due to remote working and obviously other operational changes that the business has had to encounter in the way that it does business. So one of the key things that comes to mind for me for the latter, where it relates to the business, is around automation of signing of documents, archiving of documents. We've started to see a lot of these tools within a lot of organizations from a consultancy perspective, and we've been asked to audit security around those tools just to ensure that whilst they do certainly assist the business with effectively discharging on its functions, the tools are not introducing an unprecedented level of risks that the organization has not thought about, thereby effectively negating whatever value that the tool sought to come up with in the first instance. So it's definitely important to think about that a little bit more and try and understand what our organizations have done to try and mitigate risk around this. Third-party risk. So you would understand that most organizations would have taken strategic initiatives to basically maybe move services to other providers. And I am thinking primarily around cloud-based solutions when I think about third-party risk. So yes, third-party risk is definitely not about cloud-based services only, but you do find that with a lot of services moving to the cloud, there are a lot more third-party vendors providing services to the organizations that we serve, and hence it introduces a lot more third-party risk in the sense that there are a lot of organizations now directly interface with the way that the organization does its business processes, its data primarily. And that brings me to the other question, what do the third parties have access to? So it's important to understand the nature of the data within the organization and how the third parties interact with it on a day-to-day basis. We have certainly started to see within our firm a lot more emphasis on auditing what happens around third parties, particularly as it relates to access to data and ensuring that access management processes are well understood as it relates to onboarding and offboarding of vendors, just to ensure that whatever they can access within the organization is known and managed well at any point in time. So I think in a nutshell, that pretty much sort of like covers the key considerations from an internal audit perspective as it relates to COVID-19 and the related risk that we have been seeing introduced in that particular area. So I'm just going to perhaps ask, if there are any questions, and perhaps see if there are any responses to some of the questions that we have put out, just to try and understand and gauge where different organizations are sitting in relation to internal audit and its agility when it comes to to disruption. So
Hi, Ruby. We
yes.
have a question, but we will share now the first polling question in order to give the answer, and you will be seeing the answers now. The first question.
Right. Sorry, I don't think I can see the question.
Yeah, you will see the question on the share. We will share the result now. It's only for them, and you will see it immediately after launching that.
Oh,
Just
okay.
second.
It's
Okay.
still before. That's fine.
Yeah, they are answering.
Sure.
Now, this is the result, Ruby, for the first question.
Okay.
Can you see it?
No.
It's the result. It's the question about how frequently you are your technology audit risk assessment. The results 59% continuously throughout the year, 26 annually, and 15% only when major changes occur during the year.
Okay, so unfortunately, I cannot see the results for some reason. So I'm just going to ask you to go through the answers again.
Yeah, sure. The first question, it's 20% annually, 59% continuously throughout the year, 15% only when major changes occur during the year.
Oh, okay. So that's actually quite a good response because it means that most of the organizations have started to really think about assessing the risk registers a lot more frequently. And obviously, it's something that would advocate for. So this is quite a good and welcome change within the way that we're doing internal audit. So to some extent, I suppose it then means that as internal audit, we're doing something right, and it gives us a better opportunity to, respond to disruption as and when it occurs. Okay, so the second one.
Yeah, sure. I'm sharing now. They're answering.
Oh, okay.
Okay, the second question, how frequent will your organization audit plan to be updated due to the changes? 30% annually, 45% continuously through the year, 23% only when major changes occur.
Okay, so this result is actually consistent with the first question, because the changes to the audit plan obviously would be a follow-on from the changes, or rather a reassessment of the risk environment. So I think, again, like I mentioned earlier, this is quite welcome in the sense that it shows, as an internal audit, discipline. A lot of organizations have started to really think about updating their audit plan on a regular basis, as it's not cast in stone, and anything that happens within the environment pretty much needs to reflect on it as soon as possible, so that we remain relevant, and whatever we're auditing is in line with the organization's risk profile. So I think that is a welcome answer as well. And then the third one.
This is the answer. Can you see it now, Ruby?
To be honest, I'm having challenges seeing the questions and the answers.
Okay, no worries. They replied that from 0 to 25%, 31%. From 25 to 50%, they answered 59% of the people answered this question. Then the third answer, 50 to 100, 10% only answered this question.
Okay, sorry, can I please have the answers again?
Yeah, from 0 to 25%, 31% answered. 25 to 50%, 59% answered. 50 to 100%, 10% answered.
Okay, so 31%. Sorry, the second one was?
Second one, 50%. Third one, 100%.
Okay, cool. The reason that I wanted to ask this question is it enable us to just gauge how much of technology-related risk is considered when we're doing the audit. So the impression that I get is that 25 to 50% is where the bulk of organizations are. So there's definitely opportunity for integrating a lot of the business audits with what technology auditors would be doing to just get a sense of the technology-related risks as they affect business. So it would be good to see the numbers swaying a little bit more in the 50 to 100 category, because that would show that organizations are placing a lot more focus on trying to ensure that technology risks are not just covered in isolation, but as part of the business processes as well. Okay, and the last one?
Sure. So the third answer, I will read it for you. Never, 6%. At least once in the last 6 months, 35%, at least once in the last 12 months, 58%.
Okay, so I think that the good thing is that not too many organizations are saying never, which means that organizations definitely understand the importance of doing, a technical security review, especially in light of the new risks that we're seeing being exposed on account of the fact that we have got remote working in place and businesses moving on to a lot more technology and hence business processes. So it's important to ensure that technical security assessments become a staple on audit plan. So it's quite encouraging to hear that 58% have done a technical security assessment, at least in the last 12 months. But I would definitely recommend that, the technical security assessments are done at least at a bare minimum once a year, with a continuous assessment being made just to ensure that the organizations are still well protected from internal and external risks. So I think in a nutshell, that would cover, the things that I wanted to speak about. I think we might have run out of time. I don't know if there are any questions.
I'll give you one question, Ruby. It's on your chat. I will read it for you. Could you give some examples how internal auditor can actively participate in the business continuity plans?
Okay. So I think it's important to understand that as internal audit, we are part of the business and our business continuity plans also need to be included within the overall business continuity plan. So in most instances, I think that the focus would be on ensuring that other businesses have, considered their own operational plans, but there's really nothing very specific around what internal audit would be doing. So to answer that question, I'd say internal audit needs to do a proper assessment of, the risks relating to the peculiar environment. What are the key things that we ought to deliver on? What are the tools that we use as an internal audit function? How do we ensure that in the event that we are unable to discharge on our functions, we've considered alternative ways of doing business? So like I said earlier, remote working is definitely one of the tools that has come up, quite useful for us, provided by the business, where we are still able to do our jobs without necessarily having to go to sites, particularly for those who work in a consultancy environment. But even so, for the people who are working in non-consultancy environments, we can still work from home. So those are some of the considerations that internal audit has to make. How do we ensure that we still are able to provide our services, and drawing proper plans around that and having them tested for efficacy, just to make sure that they work and they will be operational in the event that something really drastic happened. So that is the way that I was thinking about internal audit and business continuity, as opposed to how internal audit is serving the business, but rather how internal audit is thinking about its own business continuity plans, because it's not something that I see being considered often. I don't know if that answers the question.
Thank you, Ruby. That was very good. I am very sure that everybody has benefited from this. We look forward to more interaction with you in the future. Thank you for attending and being a presenter today. Thanks for opportunity to provide you as a speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have enjoyed today's session. Thank you very much for attending. Wish you a lovely afternoon and a lovely weekend coming up. Thank you. See you soon, inshallah. Thank you. Take care and wish you all the best and Eid Mubarak in advance. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.